The morning sun streamed through the large windows of Atlanta International Airport as Tanya Rhodes wheeled her carry-on toward gate B-17. She checked her watch. Still 40 minutes before boarding. Perfect timing, not too early, not rushing, at the last minute. Just the way she liked it. Tanya had spent the past week in Atlanta defending a client in what turned out to be a grueling series of depositions. Her shoulders ached from hunching over legal documents, and dark circles had formed under her eyes from the late nights preparing her arguments. But it had been worth it. The case was going well, and now she could finally head back home to Chicago. She found a seat near the gate and pulled out her phone to send a quick text to her mother. Heading home soon. Flight on time. See you for dinner? Her mom replied almost instantly with a thumbs up and heart emoji. Tanya smiled. At 34 years old and with a successful career as a corporate attorney, she still looked forward to her mom's home cooking whenever she could get it. The boarding announcement came right on schedule. Tanya gathered her things and lined up with the other first-class passengers. She'd splurged on the upgrade for this flight, a little reward to herself after the exhausting week. She definitely needed those extra inches of legroom and a comfortable seat to catch up on sleep. "Boarding pass, please," the gate agent said with a practiced smile. Tanya handed over her phone with the digital boarding pass displayed. The agent scanned it and nodded. "Seat 3A, enjoy your flight." Walking down the jet bridge, Tanya felt the familiar transition from the noisy, bustling airport to the more contained world of the airplane. She found her window seat in the third row, stowed her carry-on in the overhead bin, and settled in. The leather seat felt luxuriously soft after a week of stiff hotel furniture. She pulled out the book she'd been trying to finish for the past month and placed it on her lap, though she doubted she'd make it past a few pages before dozing off. The gentle hum of conversations filled the cabin as other passengers boarded. Tanya closed her eyes for a moment, already feeling the tension from the week begin to melt away. "Excuse me." Tanya opened her eyes to see a white woman in her mid-50s standing in the aisle, staring down at her with an expectant expression. The woman wore an expensive-looking beige pantsuit with a pearl necklace and had her blonde hair pulled back, in a tight bun. "Yes?" Tanya responded, thinking perhaps she had dropped something. The woman gestured toward Tanya's seat. "I need you to move to another seat." Tanya blinked, confused. "I'm sorry. My husband and I always sit together when we travel," the woman explained, pointing to a balding man in a navy suit who was placing his briefcase in the overhead compartment a few rows back. "His seat is 5C, but I need to sit next to him. You can take my seat instead." Tanya looked down at her boarding pass and then back up at the woman. "I specifically booked this seat weeks ago. It's my assigned seat." The woman's lips tightened into a thin line. "Well, surely it doesn't matter which first-class seat you have, they're all the same. Actually, I chose this window seat on purpose. I'm planning to sleep, and I prefer leaning against the window." Tanya kept her voice even and professional, the same tone she used in difficult negotiations. The woman's eyes narrowed slightly. "Look, we've been flying this route for years. The airline knows us. I'm sure they wouldn't mind if we switched things around a bit." More passengers were boarding now, having to squeeze past the woman who remained planted in the aisle. A young flight attendant with a name tag reading, Kelsey, approached. "Is everything all right here?" she asked, glancing between Tanya and the woman. The woman turned to the flight attendant. "I need to sit with my husband in row 5, and I was asking if she would switch seats with me." The way she said "she" while gesturing toward Tanya carried a dismissive tone that wasn't lost on anyone within earshot. The flight attendant looked at Tanya questioningly. "This is my assigned seat," Tanya said calmly, holding up her phone with the boarding pass. "I specifically chose it when I booked my ticket." Kelsey nodded. "Ma'am," she said, addressing the woman in the aisle, "if the passenger doesn't want to change seats, that's her right. What seat were you assigned?" 3B, the woman said curtly. "Right next to her. But that's not the point. Your assigned seat is actually right there in the middle," Kelsey pointed out. "You're welcome to take it, or if you'd prefer to sit with your husband, I can check if there are any open pairs of seats once everyone has boarded." The woman's face flushed. "This is ridiculous. All I'm asking for is a simple seat change." A line was forming behind her now, passengers waiting to get to their seats. Some were checking their watches, others exchanging glances. "Ma'am, I need to ask you to take your assigned seat so others can board," Kelsey said, her customer service smile becoming slightly strained. "I can't believe this," the woman huffed. She turned back to Tanya. "It would be the polite thing to do, you know." Tanya took a deep breath. "I understand wanting to sit with your husband, but I chose this seat specifically, and I'd like to keep it. Perhaps the flight attendant can help find you 2 seats together elsewhere." The woman's nostrils flared. "You're being difficult on purpose." A few passengers behind her began to murmur impatiently. The woman's husband approached, looking confused. "What's going on, Diane?" he asked. "This woman won't switch seats so we can sit together, Richard," Diane explained loudly, as if wanting everyone to hear. Richard looked uncomfortable. "Diane, it's fine. I can sit in my assigned seat. It's just a 3-hour flight." "No, it's not." "Fine," Diane insisted, her voice rising. "We always sit together." Always. People were openly staring now. Tanya felt her chest tighten. She'd experienced scenes like this before. White women making a spectacle when they didn't get their way, especially when it involved a black person who wasn't being accommodating enough. Another flight attendant, older with gray-streaked hair, joined Kelsey. His name tag read, Michael. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked. Before Kelsey could explain, Diane cut in. "This passenger is being completely unreasonable. All I asked was a simple favor to switch seats so I could sit with my husband, and she flat out refused." Michael turned to Tanya with a questioning look. "This is my assigned seat," Tanya explained again, keeping her voice level despite her growing frustration. "I don't wish to move." Michael nodded. "That's completely within your rights, ma'am." He turned to Diane. "You'll need to take your assigned seat now so we can finish boarding." Diane's face reddened further. "Do you know who we are?" "We're Platinum members. We fly this airline exclusively." "I understand, ma'am," Michael said, "but membership status doesn't change the seating assignments unless an upgrade is processed through our system." The standoff continued for another moment before Diane reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. "Fine. If no one here is going to be reasonable, I'm calling the police." A collective gasp went through the nearby passengers. Richard's eyes widened in alarm. "Diane, for God's sake." "No, Richard," Diane snapped. "I'm tired of people thinking they can treat us this way." She began dialing, her fingers jabbing at the screen. Tanya sat perfectly still, a cold feeling washing over her. She'd read about situations like this. White women calling the police on black people for simply existing in spaces or refusing to bend to unreasonable demands. But experiencing it firsthand was surreal. "Ma'am, there's absolutely no need to involve the authorities," Michael said firmly. "This is a civil matter about seating arrangements." "She's threatening me," Diane declared loudly, pointing at Tanya. "I don't feel safe." Tanya hadn't moved an inch, hadn't raised her voice, hadn't done anything that could remotely be construed as threatening. Yet here was this woman, creating a false narrative that could have dangerous consequences. Several passengers had their phones out now, recording the incident. One woman seated across the aisle caught Tanya's eye and gave her a small, sympathetic, the pilot's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a slight delay in our departure. Please remain seated if you've already boarded. We hope to resolve this shortly and be on our way." Grumbles spread throughout the cabin. Diane, still holding her phone to her ear, spoke loudly. "Yes, I need to report a threatening passenger on Flight 1482 to Chicago. Gate B-17. She's refusing to comply with airline instructions and becoming aggressive." Michael stepped closer to Diane, his voice low but firm. "Ma'am, that is not an accurate description of what's happening here. You're making false statements." "I'm just telling them what I see," Diane insisted. Richard looked mortified. "Diane, please, you're making a scene over nothing. I don't need to sit next to you." "It's the principle, Richard," Diane hissed. Tanya's heart was racing, but outwardly, she remained composed. Years of facing down opposing counsel in high-pressure courtroom situations had taught her to never show when she was rattled. The cabin grew uncomfortably quiet as passengers watched the drama unfold. Some looked annoyed at the delay. Others seemed concerned or embarrassed by Diane's behavior. Airport security has been notified and is on their way, Michael informed them. Until this is resolved, we'll have to hold boarding. More groans from the passengers still waiting to board. Good, Diane said, putting her phone away. Maybe now we'll get some actual customer service around here. Tanya closed her eyes briefly, centering herself. When she opened them again, she noticed more phone cameras pointed in their direction. Whatever happened next would likely be documented from multiple angles. A heaviness settled in her chest, the familiar weight of having to remain poised and professional in the face of injustice, of knowing that any display of the anger or frustration she rightfully felt would only feed into harmful stereotypes, of recognizing that once again, she had to be the calm one, the reasonable one, while someone else had the privilege of causing a scene without the same potential consequences. As they waited for security to arrive, Tanya couldn't help but wonder how this woman would feel when she discovered just who exactly she had decided to call the police on. The irony wasn't lost on her. Not at all. The minutes crawled by as everyone waited for airport security to arrive. Tanya sat perfectly still in her window seat, staring straight ahead, aware of the occasional glances from other passengers. Some looked sympathetic, others curious, a few uncomfortable. She felt like an exhibit in a museum. Diane remained standing, in the aisle, arms crossed over her chest, a look of righteous indignation on her face. Her husband, Richard, had given up trying to reason with her, and now stood awkwardly beside her, repeatedly checking his watch and offering apologetic smiles to the passengers stuck waiting behind them. The security team should be here any minute, Flight Attendant Michael announced, trying to keep his tone upbeat despite the tension hanging in the air. We appreciate everyone's patience. A young man a few rows back called out, "Can't we just take off and sort this out later? Some of us have connections to make." "I'm afraid we need to resolve the situation before departure," Michael replied diplomatically. Diane turned toward the voice. "This wouldn't be happening if certain people understood common courtesy," she said loudly, looking pointedly at Tanya. Tanya took a deep breath and released it slowly. She'd faced down tougher opponents than Diane in courtrooms across the country. This was nothing. Still, she couldn't help but feel the familiar burn of injustice. How many times had she and countless other black women been expected to bend over backward to accommodate others, only to be labeled difficult or threatening when they stood their ground? An elderly black woman seated across the aisle caught Tanya's eye and gave her a subtle nod of solidarity. The small gesture provided unexpected comfort. The sound of purposeful footsteps drew everyone's attention to the front of the plane. Two airport security officers, a tall white man with a crew cut and a shorter South Asian woman, made their way down the aisle. "Good afternoon," the female officer said. Her name badge read, Officer Chen. "We received a call about a disturbance on this flight." Diane immediately stepped forward. "Yes, I'm the one who called. This woman," she pointed dramatically at Tanya, "refused to change seats so I could sit with my husband and then became hostile when I insisted." Officer Chen raised an eyebrow. "Hostile in what way, ma'am?" "Well, Diane faltered, momentarily then recovered. "She had an attitude. Very disrespectful. I felt threatened." The male officer, whose badge identified him as Officer Reynolds, turned to Tanya. "Ma'am, could I see your boarding pass, please?" Tanya calmly handed him her phone with the digital boarding pass displayed. Officer Reynolds studied it, then looked at the seat number. "So you're in your assigned seat, correct?" "Yes, officer," Tanya replied. "This is the seat I booked and paid for weeks ago." Officer Reynolds nodded and turned to Diane. "And your boarding pass, ma'am?" Diane fumbled in her purse and produced her phone. The officer examined it. "Your assigned seat is 3B, the middle seat right here," he confirmed. "And your husband's?" 5C, Richard answered before Diane could speak. "Look, this has gotten way out of hand. I don't need to sit with my wife, it's a short flight." "But we always sit together, Richard," Diane insisted. "Always. For 20 years. Of marriage. Officer Chen addressed the flight attendants. Are there any other available pairs of seats where these passengers could sit together? Michael shook his head. It's a full flight. We already checked. Officer Reynolds turned back to Diane. Ma'am, from what I can see, this passenger is in her assigned seat, which she has every right to keep. You're welcome to take your assigned seat next to her, or we can see if someone else might voluntarily swap with you, but we can't force anyone to change seats. This is outrageous, Diane huffed. We're loyal customers. Platinum members? I understand that, ma'am, but airline status doesn't override assigned seating unless the airline offers an upgrade or change. Officer Reynolds explained patiently. Officer. Chen had been observing Tanya quietly. A look of recognition suddenly crossed her face. Excuse me, she said, but aren't you Attorney Rhodes? Tanya Rhodes? Tanya looked up, surprised. Yes, that's me. Officer Chen smiled. I thought I recognized you. You were the lead counsel on the Williams discrimination case against National Airlines Group last year, weren't you? A murmur ran through the cabin. Several passengers exchanged glances and whispers. Yes, I was, Tanya confirmed. That was an incredible win, Officer Chen said, genuine admiration in her voice. The changes your case brought about have improved things for both passengers and airline staff. The color drained from Diane's face as the implications sank in. She wasn't dealing with just any passenger, but with a high-profile attorney who specialized in discrimination cases, one who had successfully taken on a major airline corporation. Michael, the flight attendant, also looked at Tanya with new recognition. Ms. Rhodes, I didn't realize. Your work has actually affected our training programs. The airline implemented new policies after your case. Richard tugged at his wife's sleeve. Diane, he whispered urgently, let's just take our assigned seats and be done with this. But Diane stood frozen, her expression a mixture of shock and embarrassment. The narrative she had constructed of being the wronged party dealing with an uncooperative passenger was crumbling around her. Officer Reynolds cleared his throat. Well, it seems there's no actual security issue here, ma'am, he addressed. Diane, you'll need to take your assigned seat so the flight can depart. Diane began, then stopped, seeming at a loss for words for the first time since the confrontation began. A woman in the row behind Tanya spoke up. I recorded the whole thing. She falsely claimed she was being threatened when the lady was just sitting there quietly. She held up her phone. Got it all right here. Several other passengers nodded, some holding up their own phones to indicate they had also recorded the incident. Making false reports to law enforcement is a serious matter, Officer Chen said, her tone professional but with an underlying note of warning. It ties up valuable security resources and can have serious consequences. Diane's face flushed a deep red. She looked around at the many unsympathetic faces watching her and seemed to deflate slightly. I may have overreacted, she admitted reluctantly. Overreacted? A passenger called out. You tried to get someone removed from a flight for not giving up a seat they paid for. Another added, and you specifically said you felt threatened when she was just sitting there. Richard looked mortified. Diane, please, let's just sit down. Officer Reynolds addressed everyone. All right, folks, the situation is resolved. Ma'am, he said to Diane, please take your assigned seat or the one offered by your husband so this flight can depart. The pilot's voice came over the intercom again. Cabin crew, please prepare for immediate departure once our security officers have deplaned. With everyone watching, Diane had no choice but to concede. Fine, she said tightly. Richard, we'll switch. I'll take your seat and you take mine. Richard nodded quickly, clearly relieved that the standoff was ending. Of course. Thank you, dear. As Diane moved toward the back to take Richard's seat in row 5, Richard hesitantly approached the middle seat next to Tanya. Ms. Rhodes, I want to apologize for my wife's behavior. That was completely uncalled for. Tanya nodded but said nothing. She was tired. Tired of having to be the bigger person. Tired of having to accept apologies for behaviors that shouldn't happen in the first place. Richard seemed to understand her silence and took his seat without further comment. The security officers made their way back up the aisle. Officer Chen paused briefly beside Tanya. "Have a good flight, Ms. Rhodes," she said with a small smile of respect. As the officers left the plane, the remaining passengers quickly boarded. The atmosphere in the cabin had changed. People who had witnessed the confrontation kept glancing at Tanya with newfound interest or respect. Kelsey, the young flight attendant, approached Tanya's row. "Ms. Rhodes, on behalf of the airline, I want to apologize for what you experienced today. Can I get you anything before takeoff? A drink? Perhaps? Water would be nice, thank you," Tanya replied quietly. As Kelsey went to fetch the water, the woman across the aisle leaned over. "You handled that with such grace," she said. "I would have lost my cool for sure." Tanya gave her a small smile. "Years of practice," she replied, though the words held more weight than the stranger could know. The flight attendants completed their preparations, and soon the plane began to push back from the gate. As the safety demonstration started, Tanya gazed out the window, watching the airport workers on the tarmac grow smaller as the plane taxied toward the runway. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Everything okay?" "Flight delayed," Tanya typed back. "Taking off now, had a situation, tell you about it later." As she put her phone in airplane mode, she noticed several people around her doing the same, but not before they'd sent messages or posted to social media. She had little doubt that videos of the incident were already spreading online. By the time they landed in Chicago, thousands might have seen what happened. The thought should have bothered her, but instead, Tanya felt a strange sense of peace. Let people see. Let them witness what so many Black women experienced daily. The unreasonable expectations, the false accusations, the need to remain composed even when treated unjustly. The plane gathered speed, racing down the runway before lifting into the air. As the ground fell away below them, Tanya closed her eyes. The confrontation had left her drained, but there was also something empowering about standing her ground, about not giving in to unreasonable demands simply to keep the peace. Beside her, Richard sat stiffly, careful not to encroach on her space. The middle seat he'd ended up in was clearly less comfortable than the aisle seat he'd originally been assigned. A small, but satisfying bit of poetic justice. Tanya opened her book, determined to salvage what she could of her journey home. The clouds outside her window glowed golden in the afternoon sun as they climbed higher into the sky, leaving Atlanta and Diane's entitled behavior far below. The flight to Chicago was smoother than the boarding process had been. Tanya managed to read a few chapters of her book before dozing off, the exhaustion from her week of legal battles finally catching up with her. Richard, still seated awkwardly beside her, kept to himself, occasionally typing on his laptop but mostly staring straight ahead, as if afraid that any movement might somehow disturb her. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our initial descent into Chicago O'Hare International Airport. The local time is 3:45 p.m., and the temperature is 62 degrees with partly cloudy skies. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." Tanya stirred at the captain's announcement, stretching as much as the confined space would allow. She glanced out the window at the sprawling city coming into view below. Home. Despite everything that had happened, she felt a wave of relief knowing she'd soon be back in familiar territory. Richard cleared his throat softly. "Ms. Rhodes?" Tanya turned to look at him, her expression neutral. "I just wanted to say again how sorry I am about everything that happened before takeoff. My wife..." He hesitated, searching for words. "Diane can be set in her ways." "Set in her ways," Tanya repeated, her tone even. "Is that what we're calling it?" Richard's face flushed. "I'm not excusing her behavior. What she did was wrong, completely wrong." Tanya studied him for a moment. "Do you know what could have happened if those officers had been different people? If they hadn't recognized me? If no one had been recording?" Richard looked down at his hands. "I understand." "Do you?" Tanya asked quietly. "Because falsely claiming a Black person is threatening you isn't just rude or inconvenient. It can be dangerous, even deadly." The gravity of her words hung in the air between them. Around them, other passengers were preparing for landing, oblivious to their conversation. I've never thought of it that way, Richard admitted. I mean, I've heard stories on the news, but I guess I never connected it to your own actions, or in this case, your wife's actions. Richard nodded, his discomfort evident. She's not usually like this. We've been under a lot of stress lately with her mother's illness and some problems at work, but he trailed off, seeming to realize that excuses weren't helpful. Look, Mr. Preston, Richard Preston. Mr. Preston, I don't know you or your wife beyond what happened today. Maybe she is normally a kind, reasonable person, but what she did, calling security and falsely claiming I threatened her when all I did was refuse to give up my seat, that's not just having a bad day. That's leveraging privilege in a way that could have serious consequences. Richard was quiet for a long moment. You're right, he finally said. And I should have done more to stop her. He shook his head. I've spent 20 years trying not to rock the boat. The plane banked gently to the left, beginning its final approach. Tanya turned back to the window, watching the buildings grow larger as they descended. She'll have a lot to think about on the return flight, Richard said. Those videos are probably all over the internet by now. Probably, Tanya agreed. She felt no satisfaction at the thought, only a weary acceptance. This wasn't about public shaming or revenge. It was about accountability. The plane touched down with a gentle bump, taxiing toward the terminal. As they waited for the seatbelt sign to turn off, Tanya noticed several passengers looking at their phones, their expressions ranging from surprise to amusement to outrage. A young man in the row ahead turned around. Ms. Rhodes, your name is trending on Twitter. The videos from the flight are everywhere. Tanya's stomach tightened. She'd expected some attention online, but trending nationally? That was another level entirely. The seatbelt sign dinged off and passengers began the usual rush to retrieve their belongings and exit. Richard stood to let Tanya out, stepping awkwardly into the aisle. I wish you all the best, Ms. Rhodes, he said, sounding genuinely remorseful. And again, I'm truly sorry. Tanya nodded, acknowledging his apology without offering the easy forgiveness he might have been hoping for. Some lessons needed to sink in deeper than a quick "it's okay" would allow. As she made her way off the plane, Tanya noticed the flight attendants giving her encouraging smiles. Michael, the senior attendant who had tried to defuse the situation earlier, stopped her briefly. Ms. Rhodes, I just wanted to say how much I admire the way you handled that situation, and your work on the Williams case truly did change things, for the better at this airline. Thank you, Tanya replied, touched by his sincerity. I appreciate that. Walking through the jetway into the terminal, Tanya was surprised to find a small crowd had gathered. Some held phones up, recording her arrival. Others called out questions. Ms. Rhodes, can you comment on what happened on your flight today? How do you feel about the videos going viral? Are you planning to take legal action against Diane Preston? Tanya blinked, momentarily overwhelmed. A tall black woman in an airline uniform stepped forward, positioning herself between Tanya and the impromptu crowd. Ms. Rhodes, I'm Vanessa Williams, Customer Experience Director for the airline. We'd like to escort you through the terminal if that's all right with you. There's been quite a bit of attention on social media about today's incident. I can see that, Tanya said, glancing at the growing number of onlookers. Vanessa gestured toward a side door. We have a private lounge where you can collect yourself, and we've arranged for transportation to take you wherever you need to go in the city. The offer was tempting, a chance to escape the sudden spotlight. But Tanya hesitated. Running and hiding wasn't her style, and it would send the wrong message about who should feel ashamed in this situation. Thank you, Ms. Williams, but that won't be necessary. I appreciate the airline's concern, but I'm perfectly capable of making my way through the airport like any other passenger. Vanessa looked surprised but nodded respectfully. Of course. Would you at least allow me to walk with you? Not as an escort, just as a colleague who admires your work. Tanya smiled. That would be fine. As they walked through the terminal, Tanya became increasingly aware of the stares and whispers. Some people were openly watching videos on their phones, then looking up at her in recognition. Others nudged their companions and pointed discreetly. How bad is it? Tanya asked Vanessa. The videos? They've been viewed millions of times already. The most popular one has over 10 million views on TikTok. You're Karen on a plane and Tanya Rhodes are both trending. Tanya sighed. She'd never sought this kind of attention. Her legal victories had occasionally made industry news, but nothing that would make her recognizable to the general public until today. Ms. Preston Diane has also been identified online, Vanessa continued carefully. People found her LinkedIn profile and her workplace. The internet can be thorough and ruthless, Tanya added. Despite everything, she felt a twinge of concern for Diane. Public shaming could quickly spiral out of control. The airline is preparing an official statement, Vanessa said. We wanted to touch base with you first to ensure you're comfortable with how we're addressing the situation. I appreciate that, Tanya replied, surprised by the consideration. I'm not interested in dragging your airline through the mud. The flight crew handled things professionally. They reached the baggage claim area, where even more people seemed to be watching and whispering. Tanya spotted her mother waiting by the carousel, looking concerned and confused by the unusual amount of attention her daughter was receiving. Mom, Tanya called, walking faster. Gloria Rhodes, a dignified woman in her 60s with silver-streaked hair and warm brown eyes, embraced her daughter tightly. Baby, what's going on? People are staring and taking pictures. It's a long story, Mom. I'll tell you in the car. Gloria eyed Vanessa questioningly. Ms. Williams is with the airline, Tanya explained. She's been kind enough to make sure I got through the terminal safely. Vanessa handed Tanya a business card. Please don't hesitate to contact me directly, if you need anything at all. And again, on behalf of the airline, I want to apologize for your experience today. After Vanessa left, Tanya and Gloria collected Tanya's suitcase and headed toward the parking garage. Gloria kept glancing at her daughter, clearly bursting with questions. There was an incident on the plane, Tanya finally explained as they walked. A woman demanded I give up my seat so she could sit with her husband. When I refused, she called security and falsely claimed I threatened her. Gloria's expression hardened. She did what now? It's okay, Mom. It backfired on her completely. The security officers recognized me from the Williams case, and it turns out a bunch of passengers recorded the whole thing. The videos have apparently gone viral. Gloria shook her head, a mixture of anger and pride on her face. So you're telling me my baby is internet famous now for standing up to some entitled woman? Something like that, Tanya said with a small smile. As they reached Gloria's car, Tanya's phone began buzzing repeatedly with notifications. She glanced down to see dozens of messages pouring in, from colleagues, friends, even law school classmates she hadn't spoken to in years. There was also an email from a producer at a national morning news show, requesting an interview. This is getting out of hand, Tanya muttered. Gloria started the car and pulled out of the parking spot. Maybe, but it's also an opportunity. An opportunity for what? More public attention? That's the last thing I want. An opportunity to speak truth to power, Gloria said firmly. You've been fighting these battles in courtrooms for years. Maybe it's time to bring the message to a bigger audience. Tanya leaned back against the headrest, letting her mother's words sink in. She'd built her career on advocating for those who had been discriminated against, fighting one case at a time. But Gloria was right. This viral moment offered a different kind of platform, a chance to address the everyday injustices that rarely made it to court. As they drove away from the airport, Tanya opened one of the videos that had been sent to her. The footage was clear, capturing Diane's entitled demands, her false accusations, and the moment when the security officers recognized Tanya. The comments below were a mix of outrage at Diane's behavior and admiration for Tanya's composure. 1. Comment stood out. This happens to black women every day, but most don't have the protection of being a famous attorney. Thank you for standing your ground for all of us. Tanya closed her eyes, feeling the weight of those words. Perhaps this unwanted spotlight was meant for something larger than herself after all. By the time Tanya and her mother arrived at Gloria's cozy bungalow in Oak Park, the videos had exploded across every social media platform. Tanya's phone wouldn't stop buzzing with notifications, calls, and messages. After the fifth call from an unknown number, she finally turned it off. "You need to eat something," Gloria insisted, bustling around the kitchen. The familiar sounds and smells of her mother's cooking, chicken sizzling in a pan, onions and peppers being chopped on a wooden cutting board, brought Tanya a sense of comfort she desperately needed. "I'm not really hungry, Mom," Tanya said, though she knew resistance was futile. In Gloria Rhodes's house, food was love, and nobody left the table hungry. "You're eating," Gloria stated firmly, "and then you're going to tell me exactly what happened on that plane. The full story, not just the summary you gave me in the car." Tanya smiled despite her exhaustion. Some things never changed, no matter how old you got or how impressive your career became. In this house, she was still Gloria's daughter first, hotshot attorney second. While her mother cooked, Tanya sat at the kitchen table and scrolled through her laptop, trying to gauge just how far the videos had spread. What she found was staggering. Trinere. Main video, taken by a college student sitting across from her on the plane, had over 15 million views and counting. It had been shared by celebrities, politicians, and major news outlets. There were already opinion pieces being written, panel discussions on cable news, and endless comment threads dissecting every second of the interaction. "They're calling me calm queen and first-class boss," Tanya said incredulously. "There are memes." "Let me see," Gloria said, wiping her hands on a dish towel and coming to look over Tanya's shoulder. She chuckled at an image of Tanya sitting calmly in her seat with the caption "Unbothered," the level we all aspire to. "That's not bad," Gloria said. "Better than what they're calling that Diane woman." Tanya winced as she scrolled through some of the harsher comments directed at Diane Preston. "This is getting ugly. People are calling her workplace, demanding she be fired." Gloria returned to the stove. "Actions have consequences." "Yes, but there's a difference between accountability and harassment. I didn't want this to turn into a public lynching." "Interesting choice of words," Gloria said quietly, considering the history. Tanya looked up at her mother, understanding the weight behind her comment. As a civil rights attorney, she knew all too well how accusations against black people, especially false claims of threatening behavior, had historically led to actual lynchings and violence. What Diane had done carried echoes of that terrible tradition, whether she realized it or not. "I know, Mom, but two wrongs don't make a right. I don't want death threats sent to this woman, no matter how badly she behaved." The doorbell rang, interrupting their conversation. "Are you expecting someone?" Tanya asked, surprised. Gloria shook her head. "Probably Denise from next door. I told her you were coming home today." But when Gloria opened the front door, it wasn't her neighbor standing on the porch. Instead, a woman with a microphone and a man with a camera greeted her. "Good evening, ma'am. I'm Lisa Watkins from Channel 7 News. We're looking for Tanya Rhodes. We'd love to get her statement about the airplane incident that's going viral." Tanya appeared behind her mother, her expression guarded. "How did you find my mother's dress?" The reporter looked slightly embarrassed but pressed on professionally. "Ms. Rhodes, your confrontation with Diane Preston has become a national talking point. People are calling it a perfect example of everyday racism and privilege. Would you be willing to share your perspective on what happened?" Tanya glanced past them and noticed a news van parked at the curb. Further down the street, another van was pulling up. "I appreciate your interest, but I have no comment at this time. Please respect our privacy." She gently pulled her mother back inside and closed the door. Gloria peeked through the curtains. "There are more of them coming. 3 news vans now." Tanya sighed deeply. "I'm sorry to bring this circus to your doorstep, Mom." "Nonsense, this is your home too." Gloria straightened her shoulders. "Let me make some calls. We need to get ahead of this." While Gloria phoned friends and family to warn them about the media attention, Tanya received a call from her law firm's managing partner, Harold Greenwood. "Tanya, I just saw the videos. Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Harold. Just overwhelmed by all the attention." "I can imagine. Listen, I've already had calls from 2 major networks wanting to book you for interviews. The firm's PR team thinks you should make an official statement. Tanya rubbed her temples. Harold, I just wanted to come home and rest after a tough week of depositions. I didn't ask for any of this. I understand, Harold said, his tone softening. But this has become bigger than just an unpleasant encounter on a plane. People are looking to you as a symbol. As a firm, we support whatever decision you make, but I think you should consider the platform you've been given. After hanging up, Tanya found her mother in the kitchen, serving up 2 plates of her famous jerk chicken with rice and peas. The food's getting cold, Gloria said, placing the plates on the table. Eat first, crisis management second. Tanya smiled gratefully. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until the aroma of her mother's cooking hit her. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the familiar flavors providing a momentary escape from the chaos unfolding outside. I got a call from my firm, Tanya said eventually. They think I should make an official statement. Gloria nodded thoughtfully. What do you think? I think I wanted a quiet weekend with my mother, not a media firestorm. Life rarely gives us what we want, Gloria said wisely. But sometimes it gives us what we need. Tanya raised an eyebrow. And I need to be hounded by reporters and have my face plastered all over the internet? Maybe what you need is a chance to speak truth to power. On a larger scale than a courtroom, Gloria suggested, echoing her earlier point. You've always fought for others, Tanya. One case at a time, one client at a time. But now you have the world's attention. Before Tanya could respond, her phone rang again. This time, it was Vanessa Williams from the airline. Ms. Rhodes, I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted to give you a heads up. Our CEO would like to speak with you personally about today's incident. Your CEO? Tanya repeated, surprised. Yes. He's been briefed on the situation and is deeply concerned. The company would like to address this properly, and he feels a personal conversation would be appropriate. After arranging a call with the airline's CEO for the following morning, Tanya checked her email to find invitations for appearances on 3 national morning shows, requests for interviews from major newspapers, and even an offer for a potential book deal from a prominent publisher. This is insane, she muttered. Welcome to the digital age, Gloria said, clearing the plates. In my day, it took weeks for news to spread this wide. Now it's minutes. The doorbell rang again, and Gloria's face hardened with determination. That's it. I'm calling Lawrence. Uncle Lawrence? Why? Because your uncle has a house on Lake Michigan with a private road and good security. You need somewhere quiet to think and decide how to handle this. 2 hours later, Tanya was settling into her uncle's spacious lakefront home in Michigan City, Indiana, just an hour's drive from Chicago, but worlds away from the media circus. Lawrence Rhodes, her mother's younger brother, and a successful real estate developer, had been happy to offer his vacation home as a sanctuary. Stay as long as you need, he told her, showing her to the guest room with its breathtaking view of Lake Michigan. No one will bother you here. For the first time since the incident on the plane, Tanya felt like she could breathe freely. She stepped out onto the balcony, listening to the gentle lapping of waves against the shore. The night air was cool and refreshing, carrying the clean scent of water and pine. Her phone buzzed with a text from her colleague, Zoe Chen. Just checking on you. This thing is huge. The partners are freaking out in a good way. The firm's phone is ringing off the hook with potential clients who saw the videos and want the calm attorney who stood up to Karen. Tanya smiled wryly. She hadn't considered how this might affect her professional reputation and client base. The Williams case had already established her as a formidable force in discrimination law, but this viral moment was introducing her to a much wider audience. Another text came, through this one from the flight attendant, Kelsey. Ms. Rhodes, I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I got your number from our passenger relations team. I just wanted to thank you for how you handled everything today. Diane Preston has been placed on our no-fly list, and your case is being used in our new training program. You've made a difference. For a lot of us who have to deal with entitled passengers daily. Tanya felt a wave of emotion wash over her. Perhaps some good could come from this unwanted attention after all. Inside the house, she found her uncle in his study, watching a news segment about the incident on his large-screen TV. A panel of commentators was discussing the broader implications of what they were now calling first class while black. People like Diane Preston don't see their actions as racism, a black woman commentator was saying. They see themselves as deserving of special treatment and are shocked when black people don't automatically accommodate them. It's not about a seat. It's about who they believe has the right to hold firm boundaries. Lawrence muted the TV when he noticed Tanya standing in the doorway. "How are you holding up, kiddo?" "I'm still processing," she admitted, sinking into a leather armchair. 24 hours ago, I was just an attorney finishing up a case. Now I'm some kind of symbol in a national conversation about race and privilege. Lawrence studied her thoughtfully. "You know, your grandfather would be proud. Grandpa Joe?" Tanya smiled at the mention of her mother's father, a civil rights activist who had marched with Dr. King in the 1960s. "He'd probably tell me to stop hiding out in a lake house and get back to the front lines." "Probably," Lawrence agreed with a chuckle. He always did believe in facing things head-on. Tanya gazed out at the moonlight reflecting off the lake's surface. "I need to figure out how to respond to all this. If I say nothing, others will control the narrative. If I speak out, I'm further feeding the media frenzy." "Whatever you decide," Lawrence said, "just remember that your voice matters. People are listening now in a way they might not have before." Later that night, as Tanya lay in bed, she opened her laptop one more time. She found herself navigating to the airline's customer feedback page and was stunned to discover an official statement from the company. "We are aware of an incident that occurred on Flight 1482 from Atlanta to Chicago today. We want to be clear that discrimination of any kind has no place on our aircraft or in our facilities. We are conducting a full investigation and are in contact with all parties involved. We sincerely apologize to Ms. Tanya Rhodes for her experience and are taking immediate steps to ensure such situations are prevented in the future." Tanya closed her laptop and lay back against the pillows, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow would bring decisions and, likely, more attention. But for tonight, in the quiet of her uncle's lake house, she allowed herself to simply exist in the eye of the storm that her life had suddenly become. Tanya woke to the gentle sound of waves lapping against the shore. For a blissful moment, she forgot about everything: the confrontation on the plane, the viral videos, the media camping outside her mother's house. But reality rushed back as soon as she checked her phone. 47 missed calls, hundreds of notifications, and an inbox overflowing with messages. The most surprising email came from Harold Greenwood, her firm's managing partner. "Tanya, the executive team met this morning. We want to offer you a partnership track position, effective immediately. Your handling of the incident has brought unprecedented attention to our firm, and several major corporate clients have specifically requested you for upcoming discrimination cases. Call me when you can." Tanya sat on the edge of the bed, stunned. She'd been working toward partnership for years, carefully building her reputation case by case. Now, because of a random encounter with an entitled passenger, that goal was suddenly within reach. She made her way downstairs to find her Uncle Lawrence in the kitchen, cooking breakfast. The aroma of bacon and coffee filled the air. "Morning. Sunshine," he greeted her cheerfully. "Sleep well?" "Better than expected," she admitted, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "What's that?" she asked, noticing a stack of newspapers on the counter. "Today's headlines. Thought you might want to see them." Lawrence slid the papers toward her. The Chicago Tribune's headline read, "Attorney who stood her ground, viral plane incident sparks national conversation." The New York Times went with, "When taking a seat becomes taking a stand, race and entitlement in America." Even the Wall Street Journal had picked up the story. "Airline faces scrutiny after high-profile attorney encounters discrimination." "Good grief," Tanya muttered. "You're famous, kiddo," Lawrence said, flipping a pancake. "At least for the standard 15 minutes. I never wanted fame. Few who deserve it do." Lawrence placed a plate of food in front of her. "Eat up. You've got a busy day ahead." After breakfast, Tanya took her coffee out to the deck overlooking the lake. The morning sun sparkled on the water, creating a sense of peace that contrasted sharply with the storm of attention surrounding her. She had scheduled calls with the airline's CEO and her firm's partners for later that morning, but for now, she allowed herself to simply breathe and think. Her phone rang. Her mother. "The reporters are still camped outside," Gloria reported, "and I've had calls from people we haven't heard from in years. Your third-grade teacher even called to say she always knew you'd do something important." Tanya laughed despite herself. Standing up for my assigned airplane seat is hardly what Mrs. Patterson had in mind when she wrote, "shows leadership qualities" on my report card. "Don't minimize what happened," Gloria said firmly. "That woman tried to use her privilege to bully you, and when that didn't work, she tried to use the authorities against you. That's not just about an airplane seat." "I know, Mom." Tanya sighed. "I've been thinking about what to do next. The airline CEO wants to speak with me in an hour. And what are you going to say to him? I'm not sure yet. I'm not looking for compensation or special treatment, but maybe some good can come from all this." After hanging up with her mother, Tanya received another call from an unknown number with a Boston area code. Normally, she would let it go to voicemail, but something made her answer. "Is this Tanya Rhodes?" a woman's voice asked. She sounded older, her tone hesitant. "Yes, this is she. Ms. Rhodes, my name is Eleanor Preston. I'm Diane Preston's mother-in-law, Richard's mother." Tanya sat up straighter, surprised. "Mrs. Preston, how did you get my number?" "Richard gave it to me. He thought I should speak with you directly." The woman paused. "I want to apologize for my daughter-in-law's behavior. What she did was inexcusable. I appreciate that." "Mrs. Preston, but please let me finish," Eleanor interrupted gently. "I've spent the last 24 hours watching those videos and reading the comments online. It's been educational. You see, I'm 78 years old. I grew up in a different time with different understandings about race." Tanya remained silent, listening. "What struck me most wasn't just Diane's behavior, though that was shameful enough. It was your composure, your dignity, and it made me reflect on times in my own life when I might have acted similarly to Diane. Not so blatantly, perhaps, but with the same entitled mindset." Eleanor's voice cracked slightly. "I raised Richard to be better than that, to treat everyone with respect. But I'm realizing now that perhaps I didn't always model that behavior myself. Watching what happened to you has been a mirror I didn't expect to look into at my age." Tanya felt an unexpected emotion well up inside her. Not anger or resentment, but a complex mixture of sadness and hope. "Thank you for calling, Mrs. Preston. That couldn't have been easy. No easier than what you went through, I imagine." Eleanor paused again. "Diane has been placed on administrative leave from her job. She's devastated, of course. Richard says she hasn't stopped crying since they got home." Tanya wasn't sure how to respond to that. She didn't want Diane to lose her job or suffer harassment, but actions did have consequences. "There's something else," Eleanor continued. "Richard mentioned you're a civil rights attorney. I was wondering if you might be willing to speak with Diane. Not now, perhaps, but someday, when the dust has settled. I think she has a lot to learn, and hearing it from someone like you might make a difference." The request caught Tanya off guard. "I'll consider it, Mrs. Preston. That's all I can promise right now." "That's more than enough. Thank you for listening to an old woman who's trying to do better, even at this late stage of life." After hanging up, Tanya sat in thoughtful silence until it was time for her call with the airline CEO. Timothy Barnes was apologetic and eager to make amends. "Ms. Rhodes, what happened on our flight was unacceptable. We want you to know we're taking this very seriously." "I appreciate that, Mr. Barnes. Your crew handled the situation professionally. Nevertheless, we recognize this incident highlights bigger issues. We're implementing new training programs for our staff on recognizing and addressing discrimination, and we'd like to offer you a year of unlimited first-class travel as a small gesture of goodwill." Tanya considered his offer. Free flights were nice, but they didn't address the systemic issues at play. "Mr. Barnes, instead of giving me free flights, I'd like to suggest an alternative. My law firm specializes in workplace discrimination, and Equity training. We'd be happy to help develop those new training programs you mentioned at a reduced rate, of course. There was a pause on the other end of the line. That's not what I expected, but yes, we'd be very interested in that. Partnership. By the time she finished her calls, Tanya had mapped out a path forward that felt right to her. Rather than simply accepting the sudden spotlight, she would use it strategically to advance the causes she already believed in. She called her firm and accepted their partnership offer, with one condition. She wanted to establish a new division, focused specifically on education and prevention of racial bias in corporate settings. Instead of just suing companies after discrimination happens, she explained to the partners, let's help them prevent it in the first place. The following week, after the initial media frenzy had died down somewhat, Tanya agreed to one television interview on a morning show with a reputation for substantive discussion rather than sensationalism. She sat across from the host, Teresa Washington, feeling strangely calm despite the millions of viewers. Ms. Rhodes, your encounter with Diane Preston has been viewed more than 40 million times across various platforms, Teresa began. Did you ever imagine a dispute over an airplane seat would capture the nation's attention like this? Tanya smiled. No one expects to become a hashtag when they board a flight, Teresa. I certainly didn't. Many people have praised your composure during the incident. How did you remain so calm when faced with such blatant entitlement and racial undertones? I'd love to say it was some innate quality, but the truth is it comes from years of practice. As a black woman in professional spaces, you quickly learn that expressing justified anger often leads to being labeled as aggressive or difficult. So you develop a calm exterior, even when you're seething inside. Teresa nodded thoughtfully. A form of self-protection. Exactly. But what troubles me most about the incident isn't what happened to me personally. It's knowing that similar situations happen every day to people who don't have the protection of being recognized attorneys, who don't have bystanders recording, who don't have security officers who believe them. You've declined numerous offers for book deals and speaking engagements that could be quite lucrative. Why? Tanya leaned forward slightly. Because this isn't about monetizing a viral moment. It's about using this unexpected platform to create meaningful change. My law firm is establishing a new division focused on bias prevention and education. We're partnering with the airline to develop training programs. That's where I want to focus my energy. And what about Diane Preston? There's been significant backlash against her online. Some might say she's facing the consequences of her actions while others worry about cancel culture gone too far. What's your perspective? Tanya took a moment to gather her thoughts. I don't condone harassment or threats against Ms. Preston or her family. What she did was wrong. And yes, there should be consequences, but measured ones that allow for growth and learning. In fact, Tanya continued, I've agreed to meet with her next month along with a racial equity mediator. She reached out through her mother-in-law, expressing a desire to understand why her actions were harmful. I'm cautiously hopeful about that conversation. Teresa looked surprised. That's remarkably generous of you. I don't see it as generosity. I see it as necessary work. The goal isn't punishment, it's progress. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn day, Tanya stood at a podium in a hotel conference room, facing an audience of airline executives, staff trainers, and corporate diversity officers. Beside her stood Vanessa Williams from the airline and, somewhat surprisingly, Diane Preston. When I refused to give up my seat that day, Tanya said, concluding her presentation, I wasn't just asserting my right to remain in 3A. I was asserting my right to exist without constantly accommodating others' expectations, to hold boundaries without being labeled a threat. She gestured to Diane, who stepped forward nervously. And I'd like to introduce someone who has an important perspective to share. Ms. Preston? Diane approached the microphone, visibly uncomfortable but determined. 6 months ago, I became infamous for all the wrong reasons, she began. I was that woman, that Karen, who called security on a black woman for simply refusing to switch seats. She took a deep breath. What I didn't understand then, what I'm still learning now, is how my sense of entitlement was deeply rooted in privilege. I expected Ms. Rhodes to accommodate me simply because that's what I was used to. And when she didn't, I weaponized authority against her. The room was silent, everyone's attention fixed on this unexpected speaker. Working with Ms. Rhodes and the racial equity team these past months has been the most challenging and important growth I've ever experienced. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness or to claim I've completely transformed. I'm here because stories, like mine, of confronting one's own biases and harmful behaviors, need to be part of this conversation too. As Diane stepped back, Tanya returned to the podium. Their eyes met briefly, acknowledging the unlikely journey that had brought them to this moment. From adversaries in a first-class cabin to cautious collaborators in a much larger cause. This is how change happens, Tanya told the audience. One difficult conversation, one moment of accountability, one person at a time. It isn't always comfortable, and it isn't always perfect, but it's always necessary. Later, as Tanya packed up her presentation materials, she received a text from her mother with a photo attached. Gloria had framed the news article about the training program launch with the headline, "From Viral Confrontation to Corporate Transformation, Rhodes and Preston, Unlikely Allies in Anti-Bias Initiative." Beneath the photo, Gloria had written, "Grandpa Joe would be so proud. This is how we change the world, not just by standing our ground, but by showing others how to find better footing." Tanya smiled, tucking her phone away. She hadn't asked for any of this, not the viral fame, not the partnership, not the platform. But now that she had it, she was determined to use it well. Not just for a momentary hashtag, but for lasting change. One seat, one conversation, one mind at a time.